First of all, welcome to the Ward 2 debate. My name is Phil Bessling and I'm your nominal host. First off, thank you. It's the first time I've gotten applause. This is I'm not getting used to it, trust me. First off, fire exits here and in there. Washrooms are in the corridor to your left as you go in. And we also have water available at our welcoming table. The Better Grimsby is a group of citizens who came together and concluded that with the myriad changes that are occurring in our community, the voters needed an opportunity to hear their ward candidates, both incumbents and challengers. And this is what we've invited you here to do. As a group, we do not endorse anyone. Our role is strictly one of providing an opportunity to hear all views so that you can make an informed decision about who would best represent your interests as representatives on council. We have provided a sign-in sheet at the welcome table, which is optional, and which we only would use should you contact us for information. Each candidate has been sent the rules of procedure, which we have posted at the door. The order of speaking has been drawn by lot, and closing remarks will be in reverse. There are yellow pads and pencils around the room, and they are for your written questions, which we will take. Rovers, we have rovers, Tony and I being two of them. We'll take them, they will go to our table, and our panel will vet them. All you need to do is raise your hand and we'll pick them up. The intent is not to censor, but to avoid repeats of the same question. We also ask that you treat all candidates with respect and that you maintain decorum. And I would also ask that you hold your applause until the completion of closing remarks. Our moderator tonight is Ms. Debbie Zimmerman, former town councillor, former regional councillor, and former regional chair. Our panelists are Delight DeVoli and Henry Dorfman, and our timekeeper, Rob Hatton. And with that, I turn the floor over to Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you very much, Phil. And a warm welcome to all of you. It feels like this is like a great opportunity to get to see all of you, and so welcome. I'm just going to read something that was said at the Ward 3 debate, and I just have to point out, at the very back of the room there's this little yellow sheet that you can pick up, which will tell you about the Ward 1 debate. And why there's a little scratch mark, it's because I had the wrong number on there, so I apologize, that's my fault. And the mayor and regional councillor debate, which is coming up as well. So I just want to read something that Delight said at the first debate. I believe that democracy is built through open societies that share information. That when we share information, we become more knowledgeable and aware of the issues and the facts. That when there is debate, we can find solutions together. I think that's quite appropriate to begin tonight. So tonight is a debate. It's wonderful to see the three members who are running for town council here this evening. We've already discussed that there will be the rules of the debate with the candidates, and the candidates did receive these rules ahead of time. So the candidates have agreed on an order? Yes? So Dave Cadwell, Leanne Vardy, and Namir Rama. Is that perfect? Beautiful. So that's the order of the opening comments, and then there will be a reverse order for the closing comments. We are going to rotate back and forth so that there are different, that candidates get to answer all the questions for the first time. But if we have a question from the audience that's specifically addressed to a candidate, and we're hoping we get to all of them, the Ward 4 debate, we were able to get through all of the questions, so we're pleased with that. But if we don't, you'll get a chance to talk to the candidates, or at least I hope you do after this meeting. So let's start our debate, and we're going to be introducing each of the candidates. Dave Cadwell, we've already mentioned, Leanne, Vardy, and Namir Rahman. And we're going to give each of the candidates 2 minutes to make their opening remarks. Rob Hatton is the timekeeper, and will give you a signal when you have 30 seconds left. Looks like that, yeah. And then 15 seconds left, and then of course you're going to hear the bell. At which time I hopefully won't need to interrupt you, but if I have to, I will. Just letting you know. And the microphone will then be passed to the next speaker, so candidates, then we'll start with the speaker. So, Dave, I'll hand the microphone to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Debbie, and welcome everybody. It's great to see a large number of people at this meeting. So I just want to start. I did write some notes down because sometimes you forget things that you want to say, and then usually like on the way home, I'm like, why did I say that? So anyways, I just want to thank the public for taking the time to attend the event and showing your commitment and concerns to the community. I'd also like to thank the organizing group and the moderator for hosting the debate. I have to say, this is the first time I've attended a debate in my 12 years on council. And I think this is a wonderful thing, a wonderful process to have in place too. So, and I also like to thank the candidates that have put their names forward in running for a position with the town of Grimsby. Congratulations to them. Now I'm going to start with me, the history of me, which this might take about 10 minutes, but you can stop me anytime. Anyways, I've lived in Grimsby since 1972, and I moved from St. Catharines, moved to Grimsby. I met my wife, Terry, back in '72, that brought me to Grimsby. And we've been here now, we've been married for 43 years. Make sure I get that one right. And we have 3 daughters that have all been born and raised in Grimsby, 4 grandchildren, and 4 wonderful grandchildren that keep us busy, and we're just enjoying. We're both retired now, and that's why for me to be with my retirement and being on council, it's just a great fit. I have the time to and the energy to put forward to be on council. I'm retired. I retired from the Burlington Fire Department. I was in the fire service 36 years, 21 with Burlington, so had a great career. And I've been on council now for 12 years, and I really enjoy having to serve the community and working hard to do the right things for the community too. So that's pretty much it for me, and I'll pass the microphone on.
Well, I too made notes because I didn't want to forget anything. First of all, like Dave, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's really, really important that we exercise our democratic right and get out and vote. And it makes me feel very good to see so many people who are truly interested in what's going to happen with the future of our town. I want to thank Debbie Zimmerman for being the moderator. And I'd also like to thank A Better Grimsby volunteers for putting all this together. As Dave said, this is the first time we've had ward debates, and I think they're really important. So a bit about me. I'm married to my husband George, who's over there. We have 2 children, Dan and JC, who aren't quite children anymore. My husband was born here in Grimsby, and his family have been here since 1950, first up on Kemp Road, and now just over on Tunbridge. We moved here about 3 years ago, after I retired from the Public Health Agency of Canada, where I have been an executive for many years. When I was in the Public Health Agency, I worked in both chronic and infectious disease, and I also worked in emergency preparedness. I managed large programs, and I managed budgets upwards of $50 million. And now that I'm retired, and my children are somewhat launched, somewhat because they're still on the payroll a bit, I have the time to dedicate myself to be your full-time alderman. In terms of Grimsby's future, I believe we're at a fork in the road. And you, the voters, will have to decide which vision for Grimsby you want. Is it a vision that wants more condos, intensification, lack of transparency, and disregard for taxpayers? Or is it a vision that respects and reflects the views of residents and demands openness, transparency, and accountability for decisions that are taken? I think, and I'm saying this in all honesty, with the exception of Dave Cadwell, Grimsby deserves better than what we have. And I hope after this debate I can count on your vote.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Namir Rahman, and I'm running for Alderman. I'm going to break down my remarks into three large components. First of all, thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for the organizers. Thank you for putting this together, because as an immigrant, you get to see what democracy is and what democracy isn't. And the strength of democracy comes from participation. The fact of the matter is, when you come together as a society, we grow as a society. But enough on that. I'm going to talk about three things: the professional me, I'm going to talk about the personal me, and then I'm going to talk about what will hopefully be the public me via the Alderman position. Professionally, I'm a policy advisor. I have my undergrad and my master's from the University of Windsor in political science. I worked as a policy advisor of the Alberta Legislature. I was a senior advisor with the Strategic Policy Unit of the Ministry of Energy, so the biodigester is very topical for me. And I work as a policy advisor with the TSSA, which is a safety regulator. I've been involved in very complex decision-making issues and policy issues over the bulk of my life. But my connection to Grimsby came when my wife and I we were looking for a home, and our realtor said, you know what, you need a community like Stony Creek or Grimsby. We went to Stony Creek, we went to Grimsby, we were like, no, Grimsby is it. And what we loved was the sense of community, that we could get to know our neighbors, that our children would be safe in the streets, right? And for an immigrant, in some ways, the place of home is where you also want to be buried. And I told my wife, you know what, when my time comes, it's going to be up on the escarpment. The reason why I am running right now for this issue, for this position, is because the things that we felt we loved about Grimsby is being stripped away bit by bit. And it's an insidious thing. You can feel it, but you can't quite pinpoint on it. You know that you're uncomfortable with it. And you know that something has slipped by where your opinions and your vision of the community has gone by the wayside. And I think it's time to refocus what your vision could be. As an alderman, I hope to bring that vision forward so that people can know that their thoughts and their ideas count, their vision of what their community can and will remain the same. That doesn't mean saying no to growth unilaterally, but meaning that we retain what is special for Grimsby and what we've always found it. And the amazing thing about Grimsby is it doesn't matter, I've knocked on 1,000+ doors. If you've been here for 1 year, if you've lived here all your life, you say the same thing. This is a special community, where everybody cares for each other. So I hope to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. And we're going to move on now. And each candidate, I'm just going to remind everybody again, if you have a question, just raise your hand and someone will pick your question up for you. 2 questions were given to the candidates earlier, and we're going to ask them now to address the following 2 questions. I have to remind the candidates again that you have 2 minutes to address each one of these questions. So the 2 questions are, and we'll begin in reverse order. So Namir, you're going to go first. What are the 2 most important issues in Ward 4, and you're welcome to sit, and how do you support Ward 2? Sorry, I did Ward 4 the other night. So Ward 2, the 2 most in Ward 2, how do you propose to solve them if elected?
In terms of the 2 most important issues, I actually campaign on 3 things, but I'll talk about the 2 things that are most topical of the door. Number 1 is the biodigester, and the other one is the high-rise development, or the high-density development. I'll start with the biodigester. The biodigester is a big concern of mine because it's a town-owned project, it's a town-owned generation project, that was ideally supposed to bring in a level of income for the town. That is a good thing, because it means that we can provide for more tax and more services without having to tax people for it. But based on what is high-level analysis, or high-level figures, it seems to have run 200% over budget. And instead of giving us money, it's come down to the point where we think somebody's going to owe it money. And the big question is, if it, as a town asset, is going to run a loss, who's accountable for it? Are you and I going to backstop any losses via our tax dollars? The question of accountability comes up because council has refused to answer these questions. They've refused to take a look at how, whether it's on budget or not, whether it's bringing in money, who's responsible for its growth, who's responsible for its development, where does the buck stop ultimately? My path forward on that one is really to do an external audit. Because we've got a lot of conjecture right now in terms of how problematic that the project is. Bring in an external auditor, have them take a look at the books, open it up, see if it's going to make a profit or a loss, have this reported definitively, and then, if it is going to make a loss, find somebody accountable. And if it's management, if necessary, we fire management. Because in no industry anywhere would you find a 200% overage and expect to keep your job. That's not good management. So that's how you bring in both the accountability, as in the transparency through the audit, and the accountability through holding the managers accountable. The second element is, well, I'll make this very quick. The second element is high-density growth. High-density growth is the thing that we feel that strips away our sense of community, and in terms of proposals from the hospital corridor, 12-story buildings or 8-story buildings with 4-story variances, I'm not even sure where all that traffic's going to end up, and people know just how bad traffic is over here. This would never happen in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and for that to happen, you have to realize that council and its constituents speak as one voice. That's not happening right now. Council needs to take direction from its constituents that such development is not appropriate, and I'd like to bring that forward.
Ben? So the question is, what are the two most important issues in Ward 2, and how do you propose to solve them if elected?
Thank you. We're probably going to see a lot of similarity in these responses. For me, the two most important issues are somewhat related. One is residential intensification, and the other is traffic. Now, we have the hospital corridor study that's proposing residential condos on Main Street between Nellis and Hospital. We have the DeSantis project downtown, which reduced its height to 4 stories in the front, 5 in the back, but kept the same number of units. So it's just going to be a big monolith unless we do something about it. We have developers that bought the Syndicate and Pool Hall on Mountain L, and we potentially have the GSS site once the school closes. And I'm sure developers are already eyeing that for what they might be able to do. Over-intensification will turn Grimsby into Mississauga. It's not needed, and the people I've been speaking to as I go door to door, they don't want it. And with all this development, we're just going to have more cars on the road, and our current infrastructure can't handle it as it is. I can't imagine what it's going to be like when we have another 300, 400, 500 cars trying to get down Main Street. And sort of on the second part of that, and in speaking about traffic, we've got huge, I'll call them compliance issues. We've got speeding issues on Dorchester, and we've got speeding issues on Livingston, and we've got speeding on the mountain, and I'm really, and not to mention all the trucks up on the mountain that don't come from Grimsby. I'm particularly concerned about public safety, where it impacts kids trying to get to and from school. There's a lot more we can do to make our streets safer, including things like traffic calming measures, sidewalks, crosswalks, and police enforcement. So we need to get more from our region for the money that we're paying them. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Debbie. When I looked at this question, I thought, Ward 2, there's a lot of issues that we have, a lot of things that have really built up over the years that are causing us some issues. And being that Ward 2 is in the core of our downtown, again, I thought about the biodigester was thought of too, but the ones that I'm going to be really fighting for, and I think that they need a lot of issues to be addressed, is the truck traffic on Mountain Street. 2017, we had a lot of issues still going on with the dump trucks that are going up and down Mountain Street. And it's, the road isn't designed for that. The road was designed with a 12% grade, downward grade. Victoria Avenue in Vineland is 6%. So it's not a safe route for all these trucks that are going up and down. It was just yesterday I was knocking on doors, walking up mountain, walking down. That's a workout in itself, I'll tell you. But speaking to the residents, a lot of them were home, and so I was outside talking with them, and it was really hard to hear them. You know, just the amount of truck traffic going down. And one of the residents was telling me back in 2017 that they did a 1-hour count of trucks. Two neighbors got together. They did a half hour each. They counted 148 dump trucks alone in 1 hour, which that is just ridiculous. That is that's not safe for one thing. So again, I've already spoken with Councillor Tony Burnett of the town of Lincoln. I've had some quick conversations with Mayor Sandra Easton. What I want to do is get Grimsby and Lincoln together, and we go back to the region and say, okay, what's going on with this truck route, whether it's Bartlett Avenue, whatever destination they decide, and also what's happening with the Mid-Peninsula Corridor that Debbie was very strongly involved with. So that's one for Ward 2. Also, GSS High School. It's going to close. That's been a decision that's been made. Now, what kind of development is going to happen there? And that's something I'm really going to be following close to. Parklands, people are asking, well, will there be parklands? Yes, there will, because if in a development, we get 5% of the property. So again, through speaking with the school trustee, we're not number 1 on the list in getting that, acquiring that property. I believe we're number 6. But anyways, those are the two issues that I'll be really fighting for in this term of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, get back to my page here. So the second part of this question, and we'll start with Dave. What are the two most important issues in the town of Grimsby? And you may have already said a portion of this, but we'll let you start again. You get a 2-minute response.
Thank you. Again, there's a few issues I was considering as the candidates brought up. The biodigester, haven't supported that project since day one. I don't believe in it. It's way over budget, as Namir was giving some of the statistics to it. It's just one of the, and I asked myself, why does the town of Grimsby want to get involved with generating electricity? I mean, we've got a great hydro utility, we really do. This hot summer, there was no brownouts. So the biodigester, I've been trying to get information. Very, very lack of transparency through this term of council for information about the biodigester. Financials, you know, if they're saying it's working, but they're not proving it. Show it to us in black and white. So and the other issue is the hospital. I'm council's representative on the hospital advisory committee, and I think we're definitely in the right position being connected with HHS. Working with HHS, at one of our board meetings, they said there will be a hospital within 5 years. And I get it and I understand. It's all about the funding that comes from the province, and they have their issues in Hamilton too. But I think I'm feeling good that we will see a hospital within the start of construction. Sorry, within 5 years. And while I was knocking on doors too, some people are asking me. They're saying, "Well, we're here. The hospital might be going in a different location." Well, I did speak to some of the board members of HHS. And no, the hospital, they're planning to build it behind the old hospital and then tear the old hospital down for the parking lot. So it's been a long, long haul with the hospital. I think what we need to do as a town with the 3 communities of West Niagara is keep the ball rolling. And at Amo, there was a quick meeting with Minister Christine Elliott, and she said she's going to come down and look at West Lincoln, and let's get her here as sooner than later, as soon as possible, with the 3 municipalities. Thank you.
Well, for me, 2 issues come to mind. One is transit, and the other is transparency. I think we need to find affordable transit options in Grimsby, and it's got to be something that's going to work for seniors, because not everyone can walk to a bus stop. And, you know, this isn't about buying big buses and having regular routes and, you know, big infrastructure investments. We need to pilot a few options so we realistically know what works and get a good idea of what's the actual demand, because we hear about transit, but how many people are going to use it? And we also need to find out what is it going to cost taxpayers to pay for all this. So, you know, we start small and then we evaluate, and then we can sort of determine from there how best to move forward. Innisfil has a partly subsidized Uber that's working really well, and Lincoln has a U-Link that's also working well. As for transparency, I think this is the most important issue we face. And what comes to mind for me, as the others have spoken, it's the biodigester and the council's repeated refusal to open the books on what I'll call a roughly $12 million fiasco. Only Dave continues to press for answers, and he's repeatedly frozen out, and I've even seen him being treated with disdain for asking the question. And then, what about the $9 million from the sale of Niagara Regional Broadband? Alderman Seaborn knows, but she's not here. And I wish she was here so we could all ask her directly. This is wrong. We have the right to know it's our money, and we should accept no less than full disclosure from our council. Thank you.
I think I jammed in my 2 issues in the last session, so it gives me an opportunity to speak about something else right now, and it is public transit. That's the 3rd leg of my platform. We do have an aging community in place. We've got the GO station at one end, the Y at the other, a rec center up on the escarpment. We've got a brand new community by the waterfront, and no way of really tying it together. 5 years ago, I sat on this ad hoc citizens group that talked about transit and pushed it up to the council level. Council had a couple of meetings on this, ran a couple of numbers, then the issue died. And I think this is a bit of a shame, because we do need public transit here, especially as the community grows. What I'd like to do forward, in terms of pushing it forward, if council is unwilling to move on it, is at least direct staff to present options, whether it's the Uber model, whether it's some kind of a town-owned project, or whether it is a, what do you call it, an external service provider, and along with costs. If council is unwilling to go forward on that, then what we can do is take it to referendum. And I'd really like to see a referendum option pop up within our elections to give us better accountability and better say over issues. And depending on how we vote on that, then you've got your mandate to go ahead with it. In terms of financial accountability and transparency, I think this is a big one, because in terms of public transit, let's say they say it's too expensive or it's going into part of general revenue, collect that money as a side item. It's called, put it into a deferral account. And if we don't get transit going, return that money back to the residents. That's how you bring about accountability and transparency. And I do think accountability is a big issue at council, but sometimes accountability and transparency is a matter of communication. How do you communicate? Are your councillors putting out reports? Are they holding quarterly meetings? Are they reaching out to their constituents? Do they have an office where they can meet regularly? The structures and processes of accountability really aren't in place because nobody has thought of it, nobody's implementing it. It's not just about what you say it's what you say in council or the documents you release, but also in how you engage it. So my vision of accountability is a procedural one. It is one of getting out there and making sure that we've done the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have some great questions we're going to get to in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, I'm going to begin with what we call, well, first I'm going to ask a special question to the candidates, and then we're going to do what we call a rapid fire. It's about 15 seconds per candidate. Leanne, I'm going to let you go first because you've been back and forth and you're in the middle there. So the first question is, this is what we call a special question. Given the province of Ontario has signaled its intent to reduce the number of municipalities in Ontario and across, in Niagara and across the province of Ontario, would you support amalgamating Grimsby with Lincoln and West Lincoln? That's a 1-minute response, and I think you should remain seated just because of the time.
So my answer to that would be no. But I do think that we could look at other models within Grimsby where we could reduce the number of councillors.
My answer would be no. But in terms of the total level of bureaucracy, I think we may need to take a look at what regional council brings forward from a value perspective. I think the town councils are doing quite well by themselves. We need to talk about what value we get from the region right now.
Thank you. To that question, my answer would be no. I'm taking that question as somewhat amalgamation. No, I think we're a community of 30,000 people. I think we can handle it, our town itself. In regards to reducing the number of councillors, it's based on per capita population. So that is something that I'm not going to even say yes or no to, because that's something that will come through the mandated by the province. But that's my answer to that.
Sorry, Dave. The next part is 15-second response, and I'm going to give you each a question. And Dave, I'm going to start with you and just pass back and forth if you don't mind. So, sorry, before I do that, would you support the extension of Livingston Avenue to go through the Greenbelt area known as the Irish Grove Woodlot?
My answer to that is no. Back when that was all brought to the table by the region, I was there, I toured the woodlot. The woodlot is something very special that we have in Grimsby, so no, I want to support that the woodlot stays.
Absolutely, unequivocally, no.
No, and I think when we're talking about things like infill development over here, we need to take a look at our green spaces, our public spaces, our recreational spaces, and be sure to protect them.
Okay, this question's going to go to Leanne first. If elected, would you honor the town's official plan and not allow higher and more dense construction through the bonusing provisions of the official plan?
I would absolutely not allow bonusing, and I think it's outrageous that a town employee has the ability to give that to give bonusing to developers. So, absolutely.
No, I would not allow for the density to increase over here, and we'd stick to the official plan. And just to put a slightly different spin on it, cash for access is called corruption in most other places, and it's not here, but just saying.
Oh, crap.
And I too would say no. I've been fighting with through council and planning. Why are we not living by our official plan? And to me, bonusing is bribery. That's how I look at that. So.
Thank you very much. And then I'm going to start at the far end. Amir, you're going to do this one. So this question is, would you, if elected, would you support full disclosure, including posting of minutes of meetings of all hydro and bio companies, past and future?
Absolutely. This is how we get past our transparency issues. I think you need to be open and accountable. I'll be honest, having worked in the energy sector, some of it is going to be gobbledygook to folks. I think we're going to have to go a step beyond that, not just release the papers, but ensure that they're understandable in plain language for everybody to see, read, and understand.
I would say absolutely everything needs to be released. There has to be full disclosure, and we need a complete forensic audit of all of the hydro companies.
Yeah, I'm in the same realm here, absolutely. Yeah, we need to have the information given to us, because we're hearing that it's running, it's being, maybe there's a bit of a profit to it, but you have to prove that by showing us the financials, giving us to it in black and white, so absolutely, I support that.
Dave, this question's for you. Should the privately owned biodigester be charged property taxes?
This is a good start, because I think everybody's aware of my feelings, how I voted at council, and yes, the privately owned biodigester should be charged property tax.
Absolutely, the privately owned biodigester should be charged property tax.
I have a bit of an issue because I don't necessarily think it's privately owned. I do think that the public has a stake in it. If we're getting its profits, are we entitled to its losses? That's a big question. Should they pay property taxes? Absolutely. There are three phrases I can think of. Conflict of interest, because I do believe it's publicly owned. We have a stake in it. Preferential treatment or discriminatory access. Take your pick, but none of it is right.
Okay, so while I'm going to get a couple of questions here. I'm going to give you a question to ponder, so that we can come back to it in just for 1 minute response. Cannabis is going to be legalized in October, and municipalities will be given authorities to implement standards. Do you support cannabis both grown and sold in Grimsby? Dave?
No.
That's a tough question from my perspective, because what I do support is medical marijuana. My daughter went through some cancer, and I've seen the benefits of medical marijuana. Should it be grown in Grimsby? As long as it's regulated properly. Again, I didn't support the Alethea facility down on the South Service Road because they wanted a reduction in our from 150 meter setbacks to 80 meters. So it has to be all done in accordance with our zoning and with our bylaws. And being it's a new thing, it's a new I'll call it a new thing coming to the province or to the country of Canada. I think it's all coming way too quickly. I was at a conference with at the Niagara Regional Police Headquarters with a lot of regional and other municipal stakeholder politicians. And we all have the same feelings that it's we're not ready for this. Even hearing the chief of police, how are we going to test for this and things like that. So yeah, it's just coming too quickly at us from a municipal standpoint too. Thank you.
I too am a supporter of medical marijuana. I've seen, with my background in health, how, it saved the lives of many people who were infected with HIV. Just because they couldn't eat, it was the only thing to help them bring back an appetite. And people were wasting away. So I know that it's effective. Do I want it grown in Grimsby? I personally feel it should be grown somewhere in a rural area, not so close to our downtown, because there are issues with odors that emanate, and that we've not found really an effective way, industry hasn't found yet an effective way to deal with that. And the second part of the question was, should it be sold in Grimsby? The short answer is no, I don't think it should be. I don't want our kids having such easy access for recreation.
Well, kids shouldn't be having access to it at all. I believe if it's a smoking thing, you're going to have to be of age to be able to access it. What we're talking about in many ways is a zoning and a bylaw issue in terms of appropriate setbacks, making sure that they're not next to schools, making sure that they're a certain distance away from places like from the schools that we have over here. In terms of whether it should be grown, I'm not sure urban areas or semi-urban areas are necessarily appropriate for that level of hydroponic development, and really should be kept more towards places that are zoned as agricultural. Other than that, I'm not sure if I don't know if I've satisfactorily answered your question, but that's how it's going to roll out, unfortunately.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to start the next part of the debate with questions from the audience. And our panel has taken in all the questions and arranged them by topic. And if there are similar questions, I've tried to just pick one to encompass all of them together. So a reminder to the candidates, you have 1 minute to answer. So the first question is really broken up in two parts. It's for the incumbent, Dave Cadwell. There's a portion, and then I'm going to start with you, Dave, and then there's a portion for the candidates running, so it's broken up into two parts. So Dave, what have you done to better yourself as a councillor? Yep, you don't have to.
Oh. Yeah, thank you very much, Debbie, and I think that's a great question. What have I done? I go to the different conferences. I go to the AMO conference, and going to these conferences, what it allows me to do is to network with other counselors, talking about the different seminars that they're bringing information to the counselors at these conferences. And to me, that's very important, is getting yourself outside of Grimsby, talking to other counselors about the issues in that. I also have attended a number of times the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference. Again, I believe in going to conferences, I really do, because you do get to meet and discuss similar issues but in other municipalities. I've also attended workshops. I was just at the Tourism Economic Workshop last Wednesday, sorry, at the Niagara College, about the vision of the region with the going to 2041 with economic and tourism. So getting outside and attending different functions, workshops is very important. That's what I'm doing.
Thank you. So the second part of the question is for the new candidates. What have you done to prepare for running for council? How many council/committee meetings have you attended?
Well, I started going to committee meetings a little over a year ago, and I've also been very closely following through minutes and also looking at Grimsby Citizens for Responsible Development, because they're also feeding in a lot of the issues. So that's one thing, but I do think that my 30 years experience in government, working, oftentimes as the sort of go-between the political level and the bureaucracy. I have a lot of experience in governance and a lot of experience in management, and I think that would be something that could very easily translate into being an alderman.
In a similar vein, I've spent a lot of time in government. I've actually worked in Parliament, as in the Alberta legislature. I've spent time in committees supporting MPPs, and I've worked with the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. So there's something about government that will kick your butt and it'll force you to grow, because the status quo isn't the status quo. You have to be accountable, you have to present the evidence, you have to know process, and then be able to communicate accordingly. But what helps me also grow, it's not just the councillors, but the ability to reach out and talk to different people on both sides of the issue, because there is never a single perspective. And the one thing you learn in government very fast is if you think you've got all the answers, you don't. There are multiple perspectives to every issue. And your ability to grow is your ability to engage those, incorporate those, bring those forward, roll that into a policy perspective, take it into committee, get a vote on it, and then get those outcomes. And that's the sort of candidate that I hope to be, or the sort of alderman I hope to be when I win.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions on the hospital corridor, so I'm going to try to sort of merge them together. The hospital corridor secondary plan will increase intensification in an area that is dominated by low-density commercial. Do you support increasing height and density in this area? And what is your position if, in fact, the hospital is rebuilt or either abandoned and relocated on another Grimsby Beach site? So talk about the intensification and then what happens to your vision if, in fact, the hospital isn't rebuilt on the current site. Leanne, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Well, first of all, I think our current, well, not operational plan, but our current plan for development suffices. We don't need this secondary plan. And certainly we don't need to have intensification in that area. And I think that we can achieve whatever goals that we're trying to reach through the current plan. We can build more commercial enterprises, more health-related enterprises within the scope of the current plan. So that's one thing. And if the hospital were to be moved to another place, I think we're still dealing with the same issue. And part of it comes down to we don't have the infrastructure to bring in any more traffic. Like, we just cannot handle any more than what's there.
So what I've been hearing is density requirements that can go up to 8 stories with variability of, with a variance of 4. Can you imagine the traffic right now on Main Street, and everybody's experienced it, then add 12-story buildings on top of that, and all of those buildings letting out cars during rush time, and the gridlock that would happen. So am I as supportive of intensification and higher densities along the Main Street corridor? Absolutely not. And I don't actually view these two issues as the same in terms of what happens with the hospital versus what happens on Main Street. They're independent issues. I think we should be fighting for the hospital no matter what. And regardless of whether the hospital comes or not, we should be maintaining the character of our town and not being pushed towards something that is outside our comfort zone. And as I've said before, this would never happen in Niagara-on-the-Lake. There's a reason why this is happening. It's a lack of leadership from council right now. We need council and our constituents to be on the same page, and that's what I'm hoping to bring.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great question too, because this study did come to council, and I did not support this study. I asked the question, why are we doing this now? I don't recall seeing any vacant lots in that area of the West Link Memorial Corridor study area. From Nellis Road to, it actually basically goes to Linwood. And yeah, and I looked at the town of Lincoln, what they're doing at Prudhome's, and I thought, okay, they're doing a secondary study because they have a lot of planned new development there with a lot of vacant land. So yeah, again, I did not support it, even though it's funded 50% by the town and 50% by the region. Sorry, I just don't see the reason for doing that at this time at all. The concern I really have to it is obviously the density and intensification in relation to the infrastructure. Number 8 highway is just a 2-lane highway. And they were talking bike lanes, like where are you going to put all this, all these amenities in regards to with infrastructure for this? So again, not to be stuck on repeat, I am not in favor of this study at all. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on. This is a question, Dave, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. Several years ago, Grimsby Council recognized Grimsby as a cycling-friendly community. Why don't we have more cycling lanes? And particularly, why don't we have more cycling lanes to the YMCA? Sorry, I was watching Rob. He was going to get up and do a song here. And how would you propose to rectify this problem?
Yeah, thanks very much, Debbie. And I do remember, I also sat in conjunction with the Grimsby Active Transportation Group. We did receive Paul's in the audience here, maybe you can help me out. We did receive recognition as a town of Grimsby with all the hard work that was done through this group, bringing it forward to the town. Why we don't have any more? That's a good question. Maybe budgeting right now at this time for our infrastructure. Long Regional Road 81 is a regional road, so that's up to them to put some bike lanes in. Do we need bike lanes? Absolutely. Yeah, especially with now we have the waterfront trail is almost going to be completed soon down at the Brandhaven development, and what a great place and opportunity to ride a bike down there, because there are not many parking spots down, unfortunately. But I'm definitely in favor of more bike lanes and moving forward with our budgeting process.
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't call Grimsby a cycling-friendly community. unless you've got a death wish. And I think the reality is, if we try to make bike lanes on some of the existing roads, they were just never built big enough. And if we try to put bike lanes on and squish, 2 bike lanes and 2 lanes of traffic, we're just going to cause someone to get hurt. I think we need to think about, are there ways that we can get people like across town and maybe up into the main parts of town without going through the middle of town. Now, someone had contacted me and suggested, maybe we could put a trail beside the railway track. I thought, that's a really interesting idea, because then people could kind of zip from one end of Grimsby to the other end of Grimsby, be safe, and at certain points you can, turn up and go into the part of town that you're in, so you're avoiding all that heavy traffic. So yes, I'd like to see more bike lanes, but I think we have to be really thoughtful about how we do this and make sure that we're not causing worse problems for our cyclists than what we have now.
I would definitely like to see more bike lanes and see Grimsby grow as a bicycle-friendly community, and that's not just an east-west question, but it's also a north-south question. I have fielded, I've had conversations with constituents, residents, on how we could facilitate this greater. But I think bike lanes is a small part of a larger problem. I've talked about people who are talking about the lack of accessible infrastructure in general, and it's not just bike lanes. There are certain neighborhoods completely devoid of sidewalks, let alone bike lanes, right? And that people are having difficulty getting in and out. Or we're talking about accessible infrastructure from getting into spaces such as shopping centers and things like that. If you're in a wheelchair or if you're pushing along a stroller, guess what? It's actually quite difficult to get around town. So bike lanes is one part of an accessible framework that we have to take a look at. You also have to take a look at your seniors, you have to take a look at your kids, you have to take a look at your parents, and be able to roll that out into a single framework. And I think Grimsby could do a lot better in ensuring accessible infrastructure.
Thank you, and I'm going to move on to a question regarding heritage. Are you pro-heritage? And if so, how do you propose we can save our heritage buildings and our natural heritage features from intensifications and developers who allow properties to decay through intentional neglect?
I half suspect this property in question is down the road from me. I don't think we've done necessarily a good job in terms of heritage. Everybody talks about what heritage is and has a sense of it, but I don't think we've codified it from a zoning and a bylaw perspective, and that needs to be worked on. Heritage is a kind of a tricky question because, first of all, that gentleman, if it's the house that I'm thinking of, should be repairing that house and keeping it up to standard and code. And if not, the town should be going in and billing him and putting a lien on the property if necessary. So let's say that there are property standards bylaws, those have to be met right off the bat. But heritage isn't just in terms of houses. Heritage trees is something that intrigues me quite a bit because we've seen what's beautiful about Grimsby are these massive trees all over the place, but no real mechanism to designate something such as a heritage tree. We know our oldest trees around, but they can be cut down if by the owner without any kind of authorization. So I think we need to look at heritage not just in terms of the building, but on the processes and the infrastructure, but also the foliage.
Thank you. I agree with Namir that we have to look at heritage in a much broader way, because there's an aspect of heritage that isn't just these beautiful older buildings, and whether they are historic because of someone who lived there or not. We want to preserve these beautiful older buildings, but we also want to preserve, the feeling of why people come to Grimsby. I know that when I sit in my living room and I look out my window, I see a wall of trees and I think, how lucky am I? And this is why people have moved to Grimsby. And this is what we need to preserve. And in speaking particularly about that house, I think it's 133 Main Street, there's a game going on and I don't like it. And I understand that the developer is going to mothball this So keep it from deteriorating further until he knows about what's happening with the secondary plan. So he can incorporate whatever destruction he plans to do there. So, yes, I think we should force the developer to take care of this building properly now.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Heritage, very important question in Grimsby. I just think of, I grew up at 165 Lake Street at my father's place, and that was before the service road was in, and we had to drive through the Grimsby Beach a lot. So I'm making a lot of reference to Grimsby Beach, protecting Grimsby Beach. We've asked to have meetings. There is a committee down there that we've got started. It hasn't been really moving too quickly within the citizens of that area. And we want to know as a town how they feel about the importance of preserving down there too. Heritage in general, absolutely. I want to protect heritage, but I also want to, we've had this come up in council a few times, where the Heritage Committee will what's the word, put a list out for heritage, and I'm okay with that, but it has to be, the homeowner has to be notified, and it's only fair that they are treated in a proper way. But yeah, and talking about 133, the old Burgess property, for a lot of us have been in town a long time. The town has been challenging the owner there. Thank you. And we're not sitting back doing anything. We are forcing him to do things. I just don't like the looks of it right now either, but we are trying. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a two-part question, and the first part is going to go to Dave. With all your experience, and now looking back, what would you do differently? And what advice would you give to the candidates sitting beside you?
I don't know, maybe Lauren might beat me here, so I don't should give any advice at all.
You didn't say good advice.
Oh, thank you, Deb. What would I've been on council for 12 years now, and I really enjoy it. I have I still have the drive, I have the energy. I love this community. As I mentioned, I've been here since 1972. And everything that I've done, I'm very happy with what I've done. I've asked the questions. I do my research, which that is the best advice I'd give right now is do your research and ask the questions. And get outside the box too, as I mentioned, going to conferences, going to workshops and that. So from my perspective, I'm very happy how I've traveled down this political road right now. But yeah. So the advice to the candidates, I think what some of the things that are going on in Grimsby with the group of A Better Grimsby, and when I ran it in 2006. I just, well, how am I going to get educated for this? And what they're trying to do is just educate the people, and I think that's great. If that was around back in 2006, I would have taken advantage of that too. So, thanks very much.
Oh, sorry. No, I got to read.
It's a two-part question. So, for the new candidates, what would you do differently based on what you see happening now at council? And the other part of that question for you is, what past or present Grimsby Town Councillor would you hope to emulate? Leanne?
So what would I do differently? I think, anyone who knows me, they know my nature. I'm a fighter. And I'm a dog with a bone, and if I think I'm fighting on the side of right and good, I won't let go, and I won't back down, and I don't take kindly to bullies either. So that would be one thing that I would probably bring forward. And if I were to emulate a councillor, it would be the man to my right. And I do hope to be able to sit alongside him in council, and I think with his gentlemanly ways and my feistiness, we could probably be good balance for each other.
Not many of you may know this, but over the past year or so, I worked on this project, which ended up with a law being changed, and it was a tough fight. But my boss came up to me one day and he said, "I hear you're a bit of a pit bull." Like, I had no idea what you're saying. You'd be described as a pit bull, but it was that doggedness that allowed me to fight through the issue, back government into a corner, and actually get a law changed, right? It was the trench warfare equivalent, the policy equivalent of trench warfare that we conducted to get our way over this. And the fact of the matter is, I hope to bring two elements to this. Number one is the compassion and for the constituents. That if you can't listen to the people over here, then you have no business being in this job, number one. And that's why I'm here, to bring that as a part of this transparency and accountability. But number two is, once I've heard you, and I found that way forward, the thing that I'm going to fight on, I'm going to fight. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail, day and night, till I got no more fight, which will be never. In terms of the councillor, Cadwell's definitely the guy I emulate, everything except the mustache.
Thank you very much. This is a question I'm going to read verbatim, which means I'm not going to change any of the wording, so I hope no one's offended by this, but the planning department is not an elected committee. I've attended many town meetings and have volunteered on a town committee for years. What I observed was that most decisions from council or committees were led by the nose by the planning committee because, I quote, "they are experts. If elected, will you do your due diligence to ask questions, research, and challenge planning's direction? If you do not agree," that's the question. So Leanne, I'm going to ask you, oh sorry, I'm going to marry you.
So, I'm sorry, I missed, can you read the last part?
Sure. So the last part of the question is, if elected, will you do your due diligence to ask questions, research, and challenge planning's direction? If you do not agree, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm reading it verbatim.
Let's get something straight here. Planning is not the boss of me, I'm the boss of planning if I win. Because that's the way it is. Planning is accountable to council at the end of the day, and planning has to implement what council tells them to do. The bigger question is, can we get council on the same page to bring forward a unified vision for planning to implement? And if planning is going to go ahead and do something that we don't agree with, then yes, you're going to have to ask questions and then take it to a yes-no type of vote. That is what accountability is. So do I think planning is, yeah, again, planning is not my boss. If elected, I am planning's boss. That's the way it goes.
So with respect to planning, I think what's been happening here is the tail's wagging the dog. People in the town who work for the town work for us. You know, we don't take our direction from them, they take the direction from us. And from what I've seen going to meetings, council just rolls over and plays dead when these things come up from planning, and it's like, well, it's from planning, you know, and it's just a rubber stamp. So much is a rubber stamp. And I don't know why, and I know Dave pushes back, but I mean, there's so many things that come forward that people need to be held to account. We need to say stop. And you know, as a bureaucrat who worked in government for 30 years, you know, I worked for different political parties with very different agendas, very different ideologies, and you know, no one elected Leanne Vardy back then. They elected a certain, you know, party, and it's my job to fulfill that wish, and that's the role of bureaucracy that I see. So basically, no. Like Namir here, they're going to take the direction from me, not the other way around.
Thank you very much for the question, too. I was very fortunate. Before I got elected in 2006, I sat on the Committee of Adjustments, and for about a term and a half, I had to resign when I got elected. But anyways, I learned a lot about minor variances, about planning issues and that. And since being on council, I haven't always agreed with our planning decision. And sometimes you'll hear, oh, does that mean if we don't agree, you're just going to take us to the OMB? Well, if that's the case, because every planning issue has different criteria to it. So in the past, I've had no problem saying, well, yeah, let's go to the OMB. So it's a tough call. Planning is our staff, and I have not always agreed with planning staff. I have sat into many OMB hearings on behalf of the residents, and there's one particular at Main Street West at a small property that the residents won, and I was very happy for that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on. We've got about 3 questions left. I'd love to be able to do more, but can we have 6 left? Oh, 6. Okay, sorry. I've got 5 here. You got 6 there? Okay. Okay, so we've got 6 questions left. Closing the high school. The new Ontario government has honored a moratorium on the closure of schools. Since Grimsby Secondary School predates this moratorium, what is your vision for both the school building and the adjacent athletic field? Leanne?
Well, first and foremost, I think we should consult the community and see what the community wants. As far as I'm concerned, through our taxes, we've already paid for that school. We've paid for that field beside it. So it really should be, it's a great opportunity for us to acquire that and look at talk to the community and find out what would you like to see done with that. I don't know specifically the state of GSS itself. I mean, is it salvageable? Could it be renovated? But this is a possibility. It could be a community center. It could be an artist center. There's so many things that we could do with this. But basically, it's not for me to decide, but it is for the community to decide.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was quite a battle. It was great. The community rallied to try to save GSS as well as they did in. I went to the meetings that were at Beamsville where they were trying to save their schools too, but a decision was made that was different to what I was hoping would come. But with regards to the high school property, it is zoned institutional right now. So if say it got to the point where a developer was to purchase the property, there would have to be a change of zoning. Again, I'll be fighting for a type of development there that is very compatible to the existing homes in the area there. So, and again, for parkland, we would be asking for 5% of the land to facilitate some parkland there. So it is what it is right now. It's moving forward to try to get the best deal for the residents of Grimsby.
Let me answer it in terms of the priorities that I brought forward. I mean, there's going to be an open question in terms of not just zoning, but its future use. Zoning can be changed. So do we want high density there or not? My approach to that would be no. Can we keep a chunk of the grounds for public use? I'd love to see something like that. In terms of what its final usage should be and that density and the look, I think that really needs to go back to the community. And it has to be a conversation with the property owner. And I'm not sure if it's the district school, if it's the Niagara District School Board, and if they intend to sell the property. I think there's a larger question over there in terms of that usage. But do we go high density? No. Can we maintain a chunk of that for public use? I'd definitely like to see that. And you guys may not know this about me, but I love playing ultimate frisbee. And in the summers, we play pickup games on the field over there over the weekends. So I'd like to see something like that continue to happen.
Thank you. We're fortunate that Cheryl Kennedy Scott is here. She's the school board trustee, and it is the responsibility of the Niagara District School Board. So I'm going to ask her. She's going to get a minute to answer this question. Cheryl?
First of all, if anybody knows me, I can't talk just for a minute. So. Okay, so where do I start? I wasn't expecting to speak on this. So I love the answers they're giving. The quick answer on this first is we had their accommodation review. The schools have amalgamated. South Lincoln is in Grimsby. There's 900 students there, going very well. Closer? Okay. The process is, so we have to build a new school. Unfortunately, we're a little bit delayed because we went from a majority government here to an election to another majority government, which then had to get a Minister of Education and all the departments and everything else. So that put us a little bit delayed. But the short answer of this process is that school is not going to close in any time. Even after the kids consolidate into the new school, which is probably 2021, that school remains our property, and we have looked at it. We have talked about adult learning centers there. We have talked about other things. So that property, I know I've been talked to about, is it going to go to development? It's not even going to go because they're declared surplus, probably till like 2022, 25, if then. I would like to see it stay remaining as adult learning because we've had a lot of connections for all of West Niagara to have one school for that. So that's our intention, but we don't know what's going to happen down the road. But certainly within the next 4 years, that school is not closing.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I've been given the hand over here saying I can ask 2 more questions, and I'm going to see if I can pick some of the best and more appropriate to Ward 2. So Dave, this is for you. Could you suggest a better location for the farmers market so Main Street doesn't get blocked and cause the current traffic problems every Thursday?
Great question. As around knocking on doors, let's get one thing straight. A lot of people really do like the farmers market, and I do too. Again, with the location, I would like to, with the new council, definitely bring it up. Do we look at, are there other options for locations for the farmers market? Maybe could we block off, the top part of Ontario Street? An elderly resident that I'm speaking to today, he said, yeah, back when he was younger, they used to close the top part of Ontario Street by the library, and they used to have dances. I said, well, I don't remember any of that. But my point is, the market for Grimsby, it's a good thing, it really is. I think we need to look at other options of location, maybe behind the liquor store. It's important to have it with the downtown, the businesses, but I'll just be real quick. But after the flyer downtown, it was at the arena, and I didn't hear too many complaints of it when it was at the arena. From both sides, it seemed to go well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Dave. I think the market's great, but the issue of traffic is a big one, and I've heard a lot of people complain about the not being able to get through, but many other people also talk about it's great having a such and such a location. And I'm thinking, there's a park just behind Food Basics. Why are we holding it in a park? It's a much nicer area. It's, it's treed and very pleasant, and people can still walk to it. So I think there's definitely other options that we can consider that still keep it in a central area, and we can still maintain the market. I think the important thing here is that the market is a for-profit business, right? It's not a volunteer business. So I think what we've got to do is make sure that the town is getting the money it should get for the setup and breakdown and permits and what have you. So.
It's funny, a lot of people at the door talk about the market, but they talk about it in that duality of a lot of people like the market, but at the same time they don't like the externality of it, the backed up traffic all on Thursdays. And heaven help you if something happens on the QE, then you're backed up for miles on end in every direction. I think that's a valid question in terms of trying to find something that's relatively central and more amenable, but I think it also pertains to a larger issue in terms of the lack of public spaces in our downtown core. And if we're going to try and place it, I think we have to ask a bigger question. What's our downtown core going to look like? Is it going to be densification, or do we take the opportunity over the next 5-10 years to carve out a public space that can be used for the purposes of something like a market, for some small, restaurants, cafes, things like that. And your solution might be there. I don't know what the short-term solution is, but I do know that a lot of people are unhappy, and I'm not sure what will be satisfactory as a short-term solution.
Thank you. We actually have two questions, so because we want to ask the same question at all debates, and that's the final one. So this is the second last one. This is about affordable housing. Affordable rentals are extremely difficult to find in Grimsby. Affordable housing is almost non-existent. What would you do as a council to assist? What would you do with council to assist in this area? Leanne?
Well, I would like to be able to encourage some developers to come in and to build some nice apartment buildings. Because I know there are a lot of seniors who live in Grimsby who would like to transition from their homes into an apartment, and not necessarily into a condo that's going to tie up all of their assets all over again. So that's what I think we need to do, is to have a more diversified options for where we live. And I know that when we have, there are the working poor, and I know that there are options at the regional level to provide sort of partial subsidies for people who are struggling, and I think that's the approach that I would probably take.
There are two parts of the question, but they overlap. They're not necessarily the same. There's affordable housing, and then there's affordable housing for seniors, and they're distinct components in many ways. If you're looking for affordable housing, and if you're looking for affordable housing for seniors, I treat them as the same right now. I mean, we've got a lot of infield development coming on right now. What they do in places like Toronto is designate 10% of your new units will be affordable housing, and that's the quick and easy way of doing that. I mean, in terms of senior supports and things like that for housing and allowances, that definitely is an option. And in terms of accessible housing, that's definitely something that should be considered from a future build standpoint. And it's not necessarily the Ontario Building Code. We'd have to look at something a little more granular. But I'm not happy with, say, something like a 20-story building coming up on the waterfront. But if we are stuck with it, how can we make that work for us? Mandating that some of it is senior-friendly or affordable housing, a certain percentage, would be one of those ways of getting your bang for buck. And if you've got infield development, where townhouses come up, mandate that a chunk of that is going to be affordable housing.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And this question was brought up in the other two debates, and I was present at both of them. And it's a very good question. I look around Grimsby, and I don't see, and again, the need is there. I'm not trying to hide that at all. But how do we do it? I think what we have to do, we have to work in conjunction with the region, because the region gives us involved with social services within the region. So, and also involve the grassroots stakeholders, which would be having a meeting, a town hall type meeting, get together with GBF, GAP, the different organizations that see and live this a lot more. From my perspective, this is what I would like to do, to get educated more on this issue. I know that it's out there, and you just don't see it. So, but I do recognize that there is a need to move forward and to have things in place for affordable housing. So again, it's just doing for me to do more research on it, to get some more answers to it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that you answer this question fairly quickly, being the last question. What do you cherish most about Grimsby? Dave?
Everything. I think it's a great community. I really do. Again, as I said, I moved to St. Catharines in 1972, and I think the population was about 6,000 people around then. And a lot of the old buildings were in place, and it's just a great community. But what really I do enjoy about Grimsby is the friendliness of the people. Now, you can walk downtown and people say good morning, hello, and it just seems to be a flow of passion within Grimsby itself. We've got challenges, there's no doubt, with the growth of Grimsby, the large intensification, But overall, I know there's a gentleman in the audience too, but a lot of my former colleagues on the fire department in Burlington have moved out to Grimsby, and they just love it here. They really do. So it is a wonderful community with our access to closeness to the lake. We have the escarpment. It's just such a great natural environment through and through. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to say two things. The first one being trees. I love all the trees. I look out my window and I see these big, gorgeous trees. I tell my friends, I live in a park. Like, we can't find a place that's more beautiful. I go down to the pump house and sit there and look at the Canada geese and what they do. But I sit on the bench and I look at the water, and it's just so beautiful. So that's one thing. The other thing is, when we moved here permanently 3 years ago, I was unnerved because I'd go into the grocery store and the woman at the cash would be chatting with me and taking time, and no one's sort of freaking out in the line behind me, and I had to adapt how I lived and how I communicated with other people, because that's not the way Grimsby works, and it's fabulous. So that.
The heart and soul of any community, apart from its physical, apart from the trees and things like that, will always be its people. And that's what we came here for, my wife and I, and that's why we started a family here. It's the community. At the heart and soul of that are an amazing group of people. I'm friends with all my neighbors. We had three parties over the summer, fall, and winter that we split up amongst our different houses. My in-laws live in Brampton, and they are amazed whenever they come out that we have these full conversations with our neighbors. They'll come on over with a bottle of wine or a couple of beers and whatnot, and we shoot the shit, pardon my French. And that level of friendliness, I've lived in Windsor, I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in Kitchener, I've lived in Edmonton, I've gone out to BC. The only place that I've seen friendlier than Grimsby has been out in Newfoundland, and I urge everybody to go out to Newfoundland and experience it. But the people, wow. But the second bit of that is, I have a killer commute. It's an hour and a half in, hour and a half out if I'm lucky. But once I hit Grimsby, I'm coming over Christie, take a look at the escarpment, and it takes my breath away. Every single time, without fail. I love that. To live in a community like this is a blessing. It's a joy. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here, to keep it that way.
Okay, we've reached that magic hour of 8:30, almost. So we're going to finish off with each candidate giving a 2-minute closing remarks. And we're going to go in reverse order. So that means Leanne goes first, then Namir, and then Dave. Leanne? Welcome to come and use the podium.
So I'm just going to take a little bit of a liberty because on the agenda there was no time on the final remarks, so I might go over it too. Don't start yet. I just wanted to share an experience that I had in my work life. Some of you might remember the tainted blood scandal back in the 90s, and many people got infected through the blood system with hepatitis C, and before that with HIV. And when I was working at Health Canada at the time, the minister announced a $50 million program for hepatitis C to be developed in consultation with people who contracted hep C through the blood system. And it was a political hot potato. Nobody wanted to go near this job. And I was asked to do it. And I had to go out across Canada and meet people who were quite understandably angry and also very, very, very ill. So I would go out and people would come out and they'd, even though they were so sick, they'd come out because they wanted their voices to be heard. They wanted people to know like what this program should be all about. And when I was at one of these meetings, someone asked me if I was going to be the one who was going to do something about this, Or was I just a consultant that was hired to go out there and collect their views? And I'm going to say that was such a turning point for me in my career, because that was the moment when I understood what public service was. And that's when I understood that what I did mattered to real people. And that my work wasn't abstract. You know, it was something that had a direct impact on people's daily lives. And I've carried that with me ever since in everything I've done, no matter which health program I've been in, whether it's chronic disease or another infectious disease. I've always kept that commitment is very personal, and I know that as your alderman, I would still bring that commitment forward, that very personal thing, because I think what happens in a town, the things you're concerned about, very much affect your daily lives. You know, it's, you know, my sewer's running over, my garbage isn't picked up, or the roads are dangerous for my kids. These are very real issues and things that have to be dealt with, and I hope that I can count on your vote. Thank you.
I'm going to take a page from Leanne's playbook and talk about something that the thing that I was most proud of, and nobody, my close friends know this is the first time I've actually ever said this in a public room. When I was working in the Alberta legislature, when you work energy policy, you also have to work environmental policy, and a chunk of that environmental policy meant dealing with tailings runoff, and they were talking about cancer clusters in places like the Fort Chipewyan Nations. And the MLAs at the time just didn't want to deal with it. It wasn't a sexy issue. They, you know, they weren't necessarily going to get votes for it, but the policy folks felt that if we couldn't stand up for the little guy, then what were we doing here? And we had to fight to get it on the table. But the MLAs then said, all right, if you want it on the table, you've got to do what's known as an introduction. Bring somebody forward who we can introduce to the House, and then can ask questions pertaining to their issue. So I tried really hard to get a hold of Chief Alderman, who was the head of the Fort Chipewyan Nations, but his people, for some odd reason, didn't trust me, didn't like me, for whatever reason, and they kept on stonewalling me. I couldn't get through. And by some miracle, I found out he's attending a conference at the University of Alberta, didn't know where. Saturday, what I did was I wasn't even supposed to be working. I ended up at the U of A, and I crashed every single conference that was there till I found the one where he was at, and I had no idea what he would look like. Just went from person to person to person saying, are you Chief Allen Adam? Are you Chief Allen Adam? Are you Chief Allen Adam? Till I found him. And then I explained to him, I have got one shot to do what is right here, to ask 3 questions to 3 different ministries about how something that will affect your peoples, right? It's about cancer. And because nobody's asking them right now, and we feel strongly about this. This is the sort of person, if you can't bring that kind of dedication to public service, you have no business being in it. Because at the end of the day, it will never be about me. It is always going to be about you. And you and I may not agree, but please know that I will listen to you. I will hear you. And if I chart a path forward that is not necessarily something that is aligned with you, but it's because I've tried to take into account all the available information, all package it together and come up with the best possible solution for the most number of people. I'm not going to rehash the things that I'm campaigning on. You already know it. I'm hoping that you have a sense of who I am as a person and the things that I am willing to do for you to make sure that our Grimsby stays our Grimsby. And the only way that can happen is if I can get your vote on election day. So please consider voting for me on election day. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to give some closing remarks. What I like to do, just as the type of person I am, a lot of times I take my dog to the lake for a walk, and it's quiet, it's peaceful. And when my girls got married, the speech that the father has to give, well, I was at the lake with my dog. Anyways, I've got a little speech here I'd like to give you that I wrote, and I want to just bring it forward to it. It's just, You should vote for Dave Cadwell because of my 12 years of political experience on Grimsby Council, and it's a position of great responsibility, which I am honored to hold. As your Ward 2 representative, I've listened to your ideas and concerns and based my decisions on your needs. I feel my voting record, which a lot of people I know you're quite aware of that, reflects my dedication in representing the citizens of Ward 2 and the town of Grimsby. I am proud of our community and its people, and I'm committed to continue to represent with enthusiasm, integrity, and hard work. So my time, that's what I came up with. But anyways, I look forward to having your support in this election, and I look forward to working another 4 years as your alderman. And the last thing to everybody, please go out and vote. You've attended these events, you're getting some great feedback, information, but the important thing is to vote and vote your choice. So thank you very much to everybody for being here and for the organization for running this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the evening. We just have a couple of things we'd like to just remind you of. This was a great event. Great questions, great answers from the candidates. And I think it's so important that everyone is taking the time to get to know these individuals because it's important to the future of the town. This event was taped, and you can watch it later on the website, www.grimsbycitizens.com, if you'd like to go back and review anything. The next debate is for the regional councillor and mayor. Will be at the Mountain View Christian Reformed Church on Wednesday, October the 3rd. And then the Ward 1 debate, which will be at the Legion on October the 4th. For those of you who are here tonight, I want to just share a few things with you. First of all, the moderator for that debate will be Grant LaFleche from the St. Catharines Standard, who is an investigative reporter. And at that time, he will share his investigations and reporting on particularly the regional issues, as both your mayor and regional councillor are responsible at that level for 48% of your municipal property taxes. So specifically, he will be able to answer questions on some of the goings-on at the region more currently, particularly the NPCA auditor's release report today, if you want to find out more about that. The hiring of the CAO, for example, as well as there are a number of things that have currently, there's a provincial auditor's report on the current workings of the region, and more specifically, the seizure of a reporter's laptop and a couple of other things. So you're probably going to find it extremely interesting because he's been focusing a lot of his efforts to bring these issues to the front of the forum. So advanced voting begins on October the 10th. Election day is October 22nd. Start watching I think everybody's got it already. I think you should have got your advanced notice already with your PIN, which will allow you to vote online, or you can physically vote at the town hall on October 22nd. Delight started something where she ended with a great quote, so I feel I have to do the same. So here we go. And I like this one, but I hope you don't mind. Those have heard it before, but I think it's perfect. Elections belong to the people. It is their decision. If they decide to turn their back on the fire and burn their behinds, then they will just have to sit on their blisters. Abraham Lincoln. Thank you for coming.
As a resident of Ward 2, I do want to say this without hesitation. This has been the most attentive group that we have had thus far. Obviously, people in Ward 2 are intelligent, well-informed voters. So we hope that you've gained some insight to what each candidate can bring to the council, and hope this helps you in making your decision on your vote. And should you have any comment on our format, we would appreciate your feedback. And I'd like to thank the members of the press again for their coverage. And I would also thank the participants. And I'd like to note that A Better Grimsby appreciates the participants that have taken part in our 3 debates thus far. It's admirable that challengers are prepared to have their ideas questioned, and that incumbents who are prepared to have their record examined. So on that, we close, and I would suggest that should you have any questions of the candidates here tonight, stick around, mingle, pick their brain. So that's what we're here about tonight. Thank you for coming. And also there are yellow sheets at the back, before I forget, yellow sheets at the back about next week's events. Really important. I really encourage you to attend. It's, as Debbie said, 48% of your money. Very important. Pay attention. Thank you very much and good night.